I'm Jenny James, and I'm a singer-songwriter. I also paint and I teach as well.
Just take the top down real slow and drive around town just to show we've got the best wheels, don't you know? So rev up the engine and let's go. Thank God, gasoline, good-looking cowboys in blue jeans, sweet country music, mountain streams, and back roads, baby, do you know what I mean?
I'm an artist. I was born that way, but into a family that's very practical, let's just put it that way. On my mother's side, we're mostly preachers and teachers. And on my father's side, mostly warriors and like soldiers. So my father was a test pilot in the Navy, and he flew helicopters. So kind of an adventurous spirit. And he was very supportive of my acting when I was a kid. And my mother, on the other hand, wasn't that supportive. So she was a teacher, very strict. So I had a real close relationship with my father. He taught at a community college after he was a test pilot. So he would practice his speeches on me because he was a dean. And so I learned my humor from him. My mother was an interesting relationship. She didn't know what to do with me. Really, I think she was just confused because I was different from her other kids. I have a brother and a sister, and I'm the artist of the family, and really the odd man out. Let's just put it that way. We went to Japan for my early years. During that time is when I became deaf, actually. So I was deaf until I was 6. Because I was deaf, I really paid attention to what people were doing. They just thought I was slow. But actually, I wasn't slow. I was just deaf. They discovered I was deaf when I was playing jacks in the street, and a car came up and was honking. And my mother was standing in the doorway looking out at the street, and she saw that I didn't hear the honking. And that was when they discovered I was deaf. Then I had an operation when I was 6, and the world became very loud. I didn't like the noisiness of life, so I would isolate myself. Once I got my hearing and got comfortable hearing, I discovered acting. And when I found I could be someone else, it was just, a dream come true. I would act any chance I got, just so I could be someone else besides this introverted, shy child. And oh man, I just loved acting. I did all kinds of acting. So in high school, I was doing tennis and I was doing theater. My father was a big supporter of that, and got a big kick out of whatever I was doing. So I did all the school plays, and yeah. I did try to draw too. I mean, I won a contest when I was in 3rd grade, and I brought it home and I showed my mother. And she said, her response was so odd. She said, "Don't ever do this again." And I didn't really understand why she hated the arts until much later. I was taking a tap dancing class. This was when I was in my late 20s, actually. And I was the oldest person in the tap dancing class, right? I just wanted to learn how to tap. And I went home to visit my mother, and I said, "I'm having a real hard time with this particular step." And she jumped up and she said, "You mean like this?" And she started tap dancing and doing all these wild things. And I said, "Man, I didn't know you know how to tap. When did you do this?" And she said, "Oh, when I was 10, I had to tap for nickels and dimes and pennies during the Depression. And that's how my family got fed, was with me tap dancing on the corner. And so all of a sudden it made sense. She hated the arts because as a 10-year-old, she had to tap day and night to earn money so that they could eat. And so it suddenly made sense. In addition to being deaf, I mean, after I gained my hearing, something that's significant is that my father didn't like any kind of music, no humming even, nothing. So we never played music unless he was out of the house. When he left the house, then it was like we all broke into song, and I know I played guitar, we played stuff. But when he was home, no noise, nothing. With my father, he died when I was 17. So once he died, then all of a sudden we were all listening to music all the time. And so I began to listen, and then I began to sing. I had a therapist, actually. I call her my creative guardian. And she actually, during our sessions, she said one time, I want you to write a song for therapy. And so my first song was that. I did that. And she said, now you have to have it professionally recorded. So I went to a studio and recorded it. And the producer got really interested in me, and that's how I started my singing career. When my father died, wow, that was one of the hardest things ever in my life. Once he was gone, once that support was gone, then I just reacted negatively to whatever my mother didn't want. That's what I wanted. And so she said, no, you can't be an actress. So that's what I was going to do. And it wasn't with a lot of support. I mean, I auditioned for what they called the League of 10. So they were the top 10 drama schools in the nation. And it was really hard to get in. So I worked with my creative guardian. I worked with her on this audition piece for 6 months. It was just a 5-minute audition. But I worked with her once a week for 6 months to make sure that 5 minutes was perfect. And I got in. What do you know? I got in. But then my mother wouldn't produce the financial records so that I could get a scholarship. So I couldn't go. Once I couldn't go to get my master's in acting, which is what I wanted to do. I decided, okay, I'll just please my mother. What do you want me to do? And she said, I want you to get a master's in English literature. So I did, just for her. And I mean, it turned out okay because I got a job teaching later, which is what she wanted me to do. But mostly, I just was trying to I worked for a law firm during the day and went to class at night to get my master's. So I was working full-time for a law firm. I did a lot of independent studies, too, in that master's. I would go down to Hollywood, and I did a whole thing on Hamlet. And they did an uncut version of Hamlet. And I did a whole quarter where I just watched them rehearse and do Shakespeare. So I kind of warped it into something that I was interested in, acting. And I pursued acting and did a lot of theater at that time, equity waiver theater, where agents would come and see you. So I had an agent and did some television, not a lot, but mostly theater. Like I said, my therapist said, go record a song. And so I met Richard when I went to his studio to record this demo of this song. And he thought I was such a strange person because I have an odd sense of humor. And the first song I did was called I'm So Glad He's Hawaiian. It's a country song. And Richard saw that I had this very strange sense of humor, and he said, hey, I'd like to work with you. Let's write. Let's see what we can do. Remember, I had no background in music at all. And so he told me, well, you've got to be in tune and on time. So you probably need some voice lessons if you want to be good. So I started voice lessons with a cantor, actually, Nathan Lamb. And he taught me how to sing. Writing, singing, and I just did that every spare moment when I wasn't working at the law firm. We did 100 songs at least. And then when we began, it was really an intellectual choice. He said, well, if you're older, the best genre is country. And I thought, okay, I don't know. I don't know anything about it. So I had to go and learn about it. So I had a friend down in San Diego. He saw me at some kind of event, Songwriter event. And he said, you really have to get on stage. You have to learn how to do this. It's clear to me that you don't know how to do this. So come to my bar. And I have a bar down in Pomona. And it was a really interesting bar. It had like sawdust on the floor. It had a fence kind of a thing so that people could throw bottles at the band if they didn't like them. But the band wouldn't get hit because the net would catch it. So it was a really interesting trial by fire, right? And so I started to sing, and he taught me, Robert gave me a list of songs. You have to know all these, George Jones, you have to know all these standards, and that's what we'll play. So I did that, and people loved it. I did some K.D. Lang songs. I did George Jones. I did, all kinds of classic country songs. Patsy Cline. And people really loved it. And that's where I met Jack Tempchin, too, and started doing demos. Jack Tempchin recorded Peaceful Easy Feeling, a lot of hits for the Eagles. And I did some demos for him. And it just, I just sang and sang and sang. I recorded all the time. And learned just by doing, really. I had a band, and we went to Nashville and performed in the Bluebird Cafe. So they would have welcomed me with open arms, really. They said, come on down to Nashville. But the thing is, I didn't like it very much. So I just came back to LA. When I came back, and then at the same time, I had this dental thing happen where I got a needle broken off in my jaw when he was doing a root canal. And I couldn't hum or talk for a year. And this is right after I released my first CD. So I couldn't promote the album. I couldn't sing. I couldn't even talk. Even at the law firm, I had to walk around with a, chalkboard. And that's when I moved away. Because of all those things together, I moved away from singing. I began to teach English as a second language. I look at teaching as an art as well. It's an art form. I developed a program called Rock Talk. I still used my music. We used pop hits to teach grammar and intonation patterns, all kinds of pronunciation. So I developed that whole series, a Rock Talk series, and taught ESL for a number of years. And then I taught composition for a while. And I took a sabbatical. And on the sabbatical, I learned about how the brain works. And I decided to turn it on myself to see what would happen if I, to optimize brain function. And I decided I'm going to do something I have never done, and that was paint. So I turned all those principles on myself, and what do you know? I became a painter, a real painter. I don't have any training in it. I just do it by instinct. I don't even know what I'm doing, but I love to paint. I'm glad that I discovered this painting after both my mother and father's death, because, especially my mother, because it was unpolluted. There was no negativity at all. So teaching is an art, painting, of course, and I'm now coming back to music. So they all feed each other because they're all art forms as far as I'm concerned. I taught ESLs, did that for 10 years, and then taught composition, and now I'm teaching literature. There was a building at Oxnard that in the ventilation system, there was a virus of some sort, and I caught it. That's when I discovered I was immunocompromised, and it really affected my lungs. So I had to have surgery on my lung. They had to take out a lobe of my lung in order to save my life. And that really affected my singing and my abilities there. So I had a few rough years. And it was a disease they didn't know what it was. They called it the unknown lung disease. So I survived that. I did get breast cancer, and it turns out I got it because of a drug that my mother was given to prevent miscarriage. She had had 2 miscarriages. So she took this medicine. The result of that medicine was breast cancer in her, and she died of breast cancer actually. And I got it too. But I used a lot of alternative techniques and things to beat it, as well as radiation. I survived. And it's many years later, and I'm still here. Just recently, I decided I'm going to look at all these tracks that I never finished. What is there? And what do you know? We found some real gems in them. It's really exciting, actually. You know, what's interesting is that when I thought I was going to die, and that was with the lung issue, actually, not the breast cancer so much. I don't know why, but the lung disease really made me look at my life. And that's really what started the painting, because when I thought I was going to die, my regret was, why didn't I paint? And I'd never painted at that point. So I thought, what an odd regret, to regret having not painted when I never painted. So that was the motivation to paint. But because of that disease, I looked at anything that I had regrets about and got rid of those regrets. So no, I don't have any regrets. This is a lovely way to live, you know. Don't regret anything. Don't say you missed out on something. If you feel that way, go do it.
Wash my troubles down the sink. I don't know who cooks the dope here, honey. I just know I'm on the brink. And if I gotta choose, then I choose life. And if I gotta breathe, I wanna know why. No matter what you say about me, I choose morning light. I choose life. Doused my lovers down with petrol. Drank myself till I can't speak. I'm so tired of breaking hearts now, honey. Now my future's looking bleak.